Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, which for me is the Larrakia people, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I acknowledge the profound impact of domestic violence on individuals, families, and the wider community in Australia. I support initiatives aimed at preventing domestic and family violence and creating a space where everyone feels safe and supported. Finally, I wish to acknowledge that we all come from different places and have different circumstances. I respect and welcome our collective differences, and I strive to create a space where all voices are heard and valued, and where everyone feels comfortable in engaging and participating. And I hope you'll join me with that today. I would ask that you turn off your microphones during the session, but obviously really keen to have as many questions at the end as possible. If you could turn on your video, it's always great to see faces when you're presenting. So good to have so many of you here, but if we can see you as well, that's obviously amazing. Today's session will be recorded and it will be made available on the LaMarr YouTube channel in the upcoming weeks for those who would like to listen again or share it with your friends and colleagues. You can check out our other speakers there too. If you're interested in the upcoming Lunch with Leaders events, please check out the What's On page on the LaMarr website. And if you're not on our email distribution list and would like to be, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email and we'll sign you up. For those based in Darwin, we have a face-to-face session coming up on the 17th of April from 9 till 10 a.m. The speaker for that session will be Natasha Files, the current CEO of Somerville Community Services and previous Chief Minister of the Northern Territory. For those also still based in Darwin this year, we are launching a new initiative called Pave the Way. This is a walk-in mentoring program for women interested in building their network, testing ideas with others and gaining support. We're holding our first walk at the George Brennan Darwin Botanic Gardens on the 24th of April from 7 a.m. If for more information, visit the LaMarr website and navigate to Pave the Way. The NAB's mentoring program is due to finish in June this year. In April, we will be circulating information about the new program, which will commence in July. The information will be circulated via the NAB's email distribution list, as well as through the LaMarr website. So feel free to reach out to me if you'd like some more information on that program. We will have a short pause in our Lunch with Leaders program through April due to Easter celebrations and school holidays, and we'll be back on the 22nd of May for our next session. The speaker for that event is Catherine Clift. There will be a survey, which is really short at the end of today's session. We really value your feedback and input into what's worked for you, what you'd like to see us improve, and suggestions for potential future speakers. So if you can take a moment at the end of today's session just to fill out that very short survey, we'd really appreciate it. And now I'm going to introduce Dr. Mark Brennan. Dr. Mark Brennan is the UNESCO Chair on Global Citizenship Education for Sustainable Peace and Professor of Leadership and Community Development at Pennsylvania State University. Dr. Brennan's teaching, research, writing and program development concentrate on the role of community engagement across the lifespan and social emotional competencies in pursuit of peaceful civil societies. Dr. Brennan has over 35 years of experience in designing, conducting and analysing social science related to community, youth and citizen engagement. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Brennan. Mark, it's fabulous to have you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me in, and thanks to you and Chantel for all your help with everything. And I apologize to everyone for getting you out of bed early. You should still be sleeping. So next time we'll figure this out, and I'll stay up later. We'll sort it out, I promise. But thank you for having me. What I thought I would do here is I'll just share a screen here and just show you some things that we've been working on, and there we go. So a lot of the work we've been doing, and as Anne mentioned there, its focus is really on the intersection of young people, of communities, and really a lot of our core character skills, things like empathy, mindfulness, and compassion, and how all those come together to to make better people and better societies and a more peaceful world. And lately, I've been introduced to this term here. It's a Hebrew saying for tikkun olam. It's the idea that we can repair the world, and that's our job to do. And I think as we talk about a lot of the things we're doing, I think that's our goal for all of this, and for the young people we work with. So as we go through here, I'll just talk about some of the work we're doing, the intersection of these things. No formalities at all. If you have a question or comment, please yell it out. Or if you want to save it till the end, that's fine too. But I'm not going to be precious about anything, I promise. So as Ann mentioned, a large part of the work I do is with UNESCO. And if we think about it, UNESCO had just had its 80th birthday last year. And it was the idea that it was founded after World War II with the idea that if you think about it, a single generation of people lived through 2 world wars, massive economic, depressions and all sorts of things all over the world. And, the realization was if we were going to avoid the wars again and all these sort of things at the scale we'd had, that we had to value, it wasn't a matter of just politics and a matter of military might and everything else. It had to be a matter of education. It had to be a matter of understanding each other, embracing each other's cultures, understanding all the good aspects of humanity that bring us together. So that's in the spirit of that. That's what a lot of our work is with UNESCO. And this is just some photos here of UNESCO headquarters in Paris. That said, they do have a national office in every country, a national commission in every country. And the idea is that, venues like this can be a great source of soft power, where despite all of our differences and everything else, people can come together in the halls of this place and others and navigate the different challenges, crises, other things we have. And a lot of the work we do, it's based on building some of those characteristics, some of those skills and abilities that help us navigate these increasingly troubled times. So one of the things here, and I'll get to it in a second, why we focus on youth and why we give so much attention to them. But as you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and before that, the Millennium Goals, all the different major initiatives that come out, youth are seen as a key stakeholder within these. They're seen as an absolutely critical source of this, of advancing these. And it's the idea that we also need to engage them as stakeholders. We need to provide them with the skills and educational tools to chart their own path forward, to deal with all of these different things, whether it be climate change or peace or any of the things we're striving to achieve. So here's a bit here just to kind of focus on youth. My background is community development and community organizing. It's an increasingly long time since I was a youth, and it's just, why focus on this? And this is one of the key things that UNESCO was keen that we did with any of the new chairs that are appointed, that we focus on youth. Here's some of the stats behind this and why it's important. Half the planet's under 25. Fascinating when you think about it. And a third's under 15. So this is a growing population. If you talk to, the statisticians and demographers and all those kind of folks, they call this the youth bulge. But the one thing we do know is it's not just some little, statistical blip. It's going to be a long-term trend where this is the case. This is the population. It's only going to get bigger. And part of the reason I really like this group as well is if you look back historically, if you think about all the changes that have pushed the human condition forward, all the great protest marches, social movements, everything else, it's very often been young people that were at the forefront of that. They have the ability to see the moral and ethical blind spots that we might miss, or our parents did. And the interesting thing too, like I said, they're growing. We're going to hang out here for an hour. There's going to be 15,000 more of them globally. And not to put a negative spin on things, for any of us over 25, there's going to be 7,000 less of us. And that's okay. That's cool. Young people are filling our spots and doing amazing things. And just to give you a feel for what it looks like, this is how it looks globally. These are average age of the population in the different countries. So anything that's green or yellow is young. So as you see here, the vast majority of this massive population is in the developing world, but that doesn't mean there aren't absolutely massive numbers as well in these places that don't glow green and yellow. There's massive numbers of people. I think in Australia right now, somewhere about a third of the population, a little more than a third of the population is under 25. So we're still talking big numbers, even if they aren't as wild as some of these other areas. So let's just mention a little bit here about why engaging youth is important. These are some of the images from my childhood and some of the great social movements in America and elsewhere during the 1960s and 70s. It was young people that were at the forefront of civil rights, human rights, anti-war efforts, efforts towards equality. And I still like this idea of, as I'm going on 30 for the second time now, I really like this idea of, don't trust anyone if they're over 30. As we get older, I'm not saying we shouldn't be trusted, but as we get older, we have different responsibilities, families, house payments, everything else. Maybe young people have that ability to not have to be burdened by that right away, and that they can see what needs to be done and take those risks to make things happen. Now, the cool thing is, from those people that I had there's a whole cast of new people that are filling the gap here, that are moving change forward globally on everything from climate change to justice to a whole host of things. Pick your favorite one, but if you look around, any of the marches will be full of young people again. This one here, I like to put out there. It's this is from a march in Washington against gun violence in schools, and a lot of people, I think, had thought that maybe young people, at least here, had not been so civically engaged, not been so active, not been so involved. This really kind of gave me hope, gave me the ability to pause and really kind of get a lot of hope for this. This was the single biggest protest march ever in Washington, D.C., ever. And the average age of this crowd here was 16. So I think that's pretty cool. I think it's amazing what young people are doing. And I think if we give them the right levels of support, the encouragement, the tools, other things, we can step out of the way. We can clear the lane for them and help them do what they're going to do, but they'll do amazing things. So one of the things I do with UNESCO is a lot of work in the area of global citizenship. And this is everything from program development to research to policy and suggestions for teachers to use throughout the world. And there's three things we focus on within it. First of all, there's a cognitive piece. And what this is, it's just ways that we can understand, all of our wonderful differences, understand each other's cultures, understand where we come from, understand all these different things, everything from the amazing music and food and traditions that different places have. It's also an understanding of our global interconnectedness. The world's a very tiny place, and we're all incredibly interconnected. So for us to understand that and shape our actions accordingly is a key thing. The second big part we focus on here, and I'll mention some more of this in a minute, is a lot of work we do in the area of social emotional learning and competencies. So we focus a lot on things like empathy education, mindfulness and compassion. It's really interesting. If you look at a lot of the international organizations like OECD or WHO or UNESCO or all these others, they've been very, very vocal the last 10 years or so in saying that the skill sets that are needed for the 21st century are not the narrow skills that we often train people in. And what they kind of mean by that is, and they've come out and said this kind of thing, that I can teach you to be an accountant on the job. It'll take time, but I can do that. I can't teach you on the job to be a resilient, functioning, good team member, a good person, good other things. That's a lifetime's worth of work. So the idea is that we need to start fostering those skills very early on and to keep pushing them throughout the lifespan. And then the last piece here would be that we focus on behavioral change. It's not enough just to know about the differences in the world. It's not enough to have empathy for each other. The key thing is that we act. And that's what we try to facilitate here, is that people, get civically engaged, either locally, nationally, globally. It doesn't matter, but to be engaged is the key piece. So we do a lot there. Now, one other piece I'll just mention here is the idea of community. And I think this overlaps with a lot of this. All of us are where we are at because of the communities we grew up in. And I think that's a really important thing. And we also need to build the capacity for communities to look after each other. So this idea of engagement, and especially with young people, I think it's really important, and it helps build community, but I think community helps build that as well. So if you think about it, our communities are where we learned all of our rules, all of our ways to socialize. I see community as a function of interaction. It's the place where we've met people of all different types. We've interacted with all kinds of people. As soon as we left home at 4 or 5 years old to go to school. We started shaping the community, and it started shaping us back. It's the first thing we encounter beyond our family. So we think about how powerful that can be in fostering, positive behavior, fostering active citizenship, active engagement. It's also the case when we talk to a lot of our psychology friends and others, places that have strong communities that also have those social emotional things I mentioned. We tend to see really strong well-being in those places. People look out for each other. People tend to be happier. There's even research that shows physically they're healthier longer. They're more, kind of flourishing in lots of ways. So it's really important that way. And I think for me, it's the idea that at the community level is where any of our social change happens. I don't see it happening at the national level and trickling down. I see it at the local level where it bubbles up, and the change and the engagement that we have throughout our lifespan kind of works its way up through the system and makes good things happen. So this intersection of young people and a role for them within their communities and carving out a place for them, carving out a voice for them is key. Creating systems and structures where they can learn the best of these character virtues, really, things like empathy, compassion, all this sort of stuff. This is where it happens. So it's equally important that we're building community. And I won't go through all these, but if you think about it, community is really important. Again, I see it as an interactive process. I've seen much more, many more important decisions about communities made in the car parks, before sporting matches or, before religious services or other things than I have at city hall meetings or at city council meetings. It's a venue for interaction. And the more we interact, the more we connect and deal with each other, the more we realize our commonalities, and it allows us to build some capacity. It opens up these channels of communication. It opens up opportunities for us to take the resources we have right now and make change happen right now. And if we can embed young people in this earlier on, it's going to be much more sustainable. If we wait till they turn 18 or 21 or pick your age and then say, congratulations, you're an adult now, it's too late. We want to build them into it from the very beginning. And what we know from that is if they're involved early on, they tend to be more lifelong contributors. And while they're doing that, they're cultivating all these skills that make for good citizens, good people, people that look after each other. So one of the things I want to get here is talk about another bit of things we've done. There's lots of different ways we can engage young people. And I'm sure all of you have seen this in different ways. Sometimes it's kind of youth and adult partnerships. Sometimes it's much more youth owned. It's many different things. Sometimes it's having young people, as participants in programs or having them as, members of an advisory board or other things. There's a lot of things we can do. But one of the things we're seeing from a lot of our research now is that the more ownership they have of things, the better. That's going to lead to more long-term sustainable involvement, but it's also they come with a whole new set of skill sets. Think about it. I can barely use YouTube now. They can teach me all sorts of stuff on TikTok and everything else, all kinds of new technology, all kinds of new ways of communicating and interacting. When given the opportunity to lead on these things, we tend to see them thrive. And one of the things we've been doing a lot is this idea of youth voice. And I'll just show you here just for a second. And I'm happy to share more on this at any point. Basically what it is, UNESCO and all kinds of other organizations realize that there is this massive youth population globally. But it's kind of tricky. How do you get their voices heard? There might be certain ways, there might be certain things, but it's kind of tricky. So one of the things we did in cooperation with UNESCO is we created this Youth as Researchers program. And what it is a crash course in doing research, social science type research. And we worked with young people to put the information into best practices, best terms. And what it allows them to do is to conduct research of their choosing on topics of their choosing and help us understand what's happening in different places. And this is kind of cool when you think about it. And the results have been really kind of impressive, I think, too. One of the things we found early on was the idea they can get better data. As we're trying to make programs and policy decisions and everything else, I'm stuck in my office too long every day. I don't get out enough. They're on the ground 24 hours a day. Their social networks are deeper. They have more friends, acquaintances, contacts, everything else. So they're in touch with more people. The other thing is being that it's a youth-driven or peer-to-peer driven research process, they get access to information that I couldn't get. I mean, think about it. If I was to go in my local community and, start asking people about drug use and everything else, I'm too old, I'm too gray. They're not going to tell me. They're not, but they're going to tell their friends. They're going to tell their peers. So the ability to get actually really much more accurate data, we've seen this time and time again with it. And it's pretty wild what they've done. Now, a couple of things, I'll just give you some of the, a little bit more what it is here again, but it allows them to come to the table to policymakers with data. It's very hard to ignore them then. And the really nice thing I found is actually that almost without exception, the policymakers I've worked with and others, they've really welcomed the ability to talk to young people like this. Them coming to the table with that little bit of data gives policymakers and others the ability to say, okay, they must know what they're talking about. I'm not going to tell them they don't know the real world, because they do. And policymakers have been very, very keen to look into this and see what they've had. We can talk more about that later on. The other thing too is that they go do their research and do all their findings and everything else. But instead of doing boring academic journal articles, they do YouTube videos or other things like that, infographics, TikTok, everything else, to share the findings. And it's a really nice way to get it out there. And truth be told, originally we kind of suggested this as a way, assuming that adults wouldn't want to listen to them, so they had a way to go around them or go through them or whatever. Like I said, it turns out adults and policymakers do want to hear them, and their ability to put their findings into a 2 or 3 minute YouTube video. It's very powerful, very clear. Everybody gets it, and it conveys the messages of what they're doing. So been really, really good in lots of ways. And just some of the outcomes here, just so we've done a lot of evaluation around this stuff just to show how it works or what it works. We originally, like I said, we developed it just to ensure that youth voices were heard. We had some ideas of things we hoped would come out of it, but actually we're finding a whole bunch of really wild things that have come out of it. So we've seen increases in empathy and some of the social emotional skills. That kind of makes sense because, I mean, for me at least, research is about telling someone else's story. So putting yourselves in the shoes of others as you try and interpret what they're going through, it makes sense there. But we've also seen that things like civic engagement go up. Their belief that they can change the world, I think, is fantastic. By doing this, they realize that the world is much more flexible and much more adaptable than they would think, most of us would think. We've seen some of their kind of personal things increase. So self and community efficacy, critical thinking have come on up. One of the big things that came up was a real passion for doing research. Now, and I'm not talking, boring academic research or other things. They developed because they weren't doing this for a course. They weren't doing it for a professor's grade. They weren't doing it to report to some professor or some teacher. They were doing it to tell the story that they thought was important. So because of that, they've latched on to the art and craft and the passion for telling the story, the passion for research. So I can't tell you how many times I've had 14-year-olds, ring me up on a Sunday and say, I think I sampled wrong, or I was collecting surveys and I think I slipped some bias into it when I was doing it, all these sort of things. They wanted to tell the story accurately. So with that, we're seeing, a whole bunch of kind of STEM things. If they can understand the idea behind sampling, if they can understand the techniques for, very, very simple kind of analysis. So we're seeing a whole host of positive outcomes come from it. Now, the other thing I would say here with this, this program and another one I'll mention in a minute, all these ones we do for UNESCO, they're public access, they're public use, they're free. If anyone, either of these programs I'm going to mention sound interesting, please drop me a note. I'll send you the curriculum and the materials. For this one here, we've created, during COVID when we did this, we kind of made up videos for training because we couldn't do it in person. We've recently re-recorded them and they're kind of high def and everything else. So we've got a whole series of materials. The only thing with this one that we ask is that if a local youth organization or whoever is using this methodology, is this they connect with a local university, not to get permission or not to have people tell them what to do, but just so they can get an ethics review. Any of us that do research, we all go through an ethics review for any of our projects, And I've been doing, as Ann said, I've been doing this kind of research for a long time. I still get so close to the research that I, fall into the trap of potentially making a mistake that could put someone in harm's way or could identify someone or something else. That's just the nature of doing research. So that's all we ask. But otherwise, it's completely free and people are welcome to it. And I can send you examples if you'd like, or I'll show you a web page at the end where we've got a lot of the videos listed. And we've done that program now probably 150 times globally, maybe, and it's become UNESCO's go-to methodology for getting youth voice. So I think they're doing about 20 of them this year. And just as an interesting aside, just to, again, to show you how passionate and powerful young people are. If you think back to the early days of COVID, when we're all locked in our houses and we're starting to bounce off the walls, a fellow UNESCO chair of mine that we co-developed the youth researchers work with, he rang me up and said, why don't we do 2 or 3 teams? And a team has usually 10 people. 2 or 3 teams just to see what young people are thinking about this, kind of unprecedented pandemic. And we said, okay, yeah, we'll do that. And we got in touch with our friends at UNESCO and said, we put it on your Facebook page and just see if we can get a couple volunteers. And they said, yeah, no problem. That was a Thursday. And my friend at UNESCO rang me on a Sunday and said, I think we should take the request for volunteers down because we have 7,000 applicants. So in 3 days, we got 7,000 applicants. We ended up doing completely by accident what we think is the largest study of youth during COVID. And it was cool. We ended up having a couple dozen teams all over the world and all sorts of other stuff. So young people were ready to go, and their insight was really, really powerful. It was stuff that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. So it's cool that way. One of the other things I'll mention here is I've been mentioning is this social emotional learning. One of the big ones we've focused on is empathy. And there's also, a series of parallel work going on around mindfulness and compassion, human flourishing. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we're connected with. But we put a lot of effort into the empathy side. And we've got another program, and again, this one's completely free and can send you the curriculum. This is called Activating Social Empathy. And we've created this for 3 different, we've curriculum for 3 different kind of age ranges. So we've one for kind of secondary school level, so high school, that sort of thing. We've got one for university level, young adults, and then we have one that's been developed for gap year in different places that have a gap year between school and university. So each of them are slightly different, but the idea is there's the same general structure. It's been set up in a way that it can be taught as part of an existing module or a standalone module. It can also be taught peer-to-peer taught. And basically it does 3 things. It helps us understand the ability to perceive other people's emotions, to put ourselves in other people's shoes, which is really kind of what empathy is. It helps us practice it and grow it. And then it helps us kind of act on it. And that's really kind of where this all comes together. And as we've talked to a lot of folks over the last 7 or 8 years on this, empathy is a really, really strange and interesting thing. It's one of the few parts of our brain that's actually more like a muscle. It actually shrinks and contracts the part of our brain. So if you lose it, you can always get the muscle back in shape and regrow it just by practicing it more. And it shows a whole host of outcomes that I'll mention. We've done a lot of evaluation for this, but particularly because starting in September, it's mandatory in all schools in Ireland. That's where we had developed it. It's going to be, so it's mandatory in all schools in Ireland. We've done it probably in 50 or so schools in North America, throughout Canada and the US. And it's gradually being rolled out through UNESCO in different places. And the cool things that come out of it, and like I said, we had to do a lot of evaluation for this, especially in the case of Ireland. There was a funder who, they were very nice to give us money, but they also knew enough about research to be dangerous. And they insisted we do, randomized control trials and all kinds of research and evaluation that was really kind of overkill. But nonetheless, we did it. And it showed some really, really good outcomes. So some of the things that we find with it are the things you would think. Okay, so there's better relationships you have with people, less antisocial behavior, aggression, prejudice, all those kind of things. So the more empathy we have there, the better. Now, as we've talked with schools and others, one of the key things we kept hearing from heads of schools and everything else and teachers was that, yeah, it's all perfect. This is brilliant. It sounds wonderful, but we can't take on another module to teach. Teachers are overwhelmed with stuff and they just can't take on another one. The other thing we heard was, yeah, this is great. I'm sure that's wonderful for a social science course, but how could you ever have empathy in a maths or a science course? Which I struggled with maths, so I know exactly how you can have empathy there and how it is needed. So that kind of helped us, take a pause a little bit and think about this. So there's a couple things. We've got the curriculum, we've got other things. The idea is that it can be delivered in schools or in NGOs or non-formal settings, but we're also working to have it embedded in teacher education. So teaching with empathy becomes just part of the standard process. A lot of the best teachers I ever had taught by their stories and by their experiences and how they struggled with maths or whatever else, and then got there. So we're working on both sides of the educational spectrum there. But the really big thing that sold this to heads of schools and others was that through our work and our research and other things, but also through some other ones, there's the Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Peace, it's the UNESCO Center in Delhi. They're a great bunch, and they've been looking at what they've been calling firing Gandhi neurons, and looking, they'll do brain scans on anybody for anything. They just love looking at all this stuff. They've really conclusively linked increased empathy to higher educational attainment and retention. And that really struck a bell with a lot of the teachers. So the idea of if they were only playing to the scores and the marks numbers and everything else, their students were going to get better scores, better marks, if they had more empathy. And the explanation from this, the psychology folks have kind of helped understand this a little bit. Basically what it means is the more empathy you have, your brain processes information differently. So think about like any of your favorite books, or think about, a sad story. Think about, Charles Dickens, one of his novels, and think of, if you don't have much empathy, you read a story, it's a sad story about an orphan, and you take it with that and you walk away. If you've developed a lot of empathy, something really interesting happens. Your brain processes the information the same as if it was a lived life experience. So essentially, you start having a memory because of this. It's a lot harder for us to lose our memories than it is for, we lose things that were presented in a lecture almost immediately. Our lived experiences, our memories of things, they stay with us for a long time. So this idea of empathy contributing to educational attainment and retention, really, really cool, and big, really clear findings there too. So there's a lot of reasons why we should do it, and a lot of reasons why it's really effective. Okay, just a couple other things here that are interesting findings too. The more empathy we have, the more we develop it, practice it, tends to open up new relationships, very often with people that are very different from us. So as we look at efforts towards, equity, inclusion, all sorts of things, empathy is a major benefit here. It's also the case by giving empathy, the only people that get more from it than the people we give it to is ourselves. It allows us to open up new aspects of support for ourselves and for others. One of them here, this fourth one here, I find fascinating. It's the idea that it gives us, the more empathy we have, it gives us a break from our own baggage. And we've seen some really, really wild examples. There was one recently. There was a friend of ours who struggled with mental health issues his whole life, and his father unfortunately was diagnosed with dementia, and all of our first reaction was, oh, this is going to put him over the edge. This is going to be the end of him. And actually, it was completely the opposite. He became his father's caretaker, and by having empathy for him trying to put himself in the shoes of his father, trying to think about what he could do to help him navigate this horrible thing, his mental health issues almost completely evaporated. And then, unfortunately, his father passed away a few years ago, or a year or so ago, and it was remarkable, his behavior. Sure, he was sad. We were all devastated. It was tragic. It was a loss. But actually, he was much more celebrative of a father. It wasn't a turning point that sent him into a spiral. It was that ability to practice and develop empathy that actually, had him be a different person in lots of ways. And we've seen that in other ways. So it comes around there. So So those are some of the benefits. And as I just start wrapping up here, I'll just show you a few other things we're doing. And if anybody's interested in any of this, I'd love to talk more about it or share things or have partnerships or whatever. We've pulling all these different pieces together. We started developing some structures with a bunch of our international partners. So one of them is the Duke of Edinburgh Award, which serves about 1 million young people every year. The Outward Bound program. So both of these are kind of non-formal education settings, which we're trying to do a lot with. We're also doing work with some of our global partners and also with a few institutes, research institutes that promote character development. And by character, they're focusing on really core kind of, character virtues that are purely positive type things. So we're doing a lot of work in this area. And what we've is a group of colleagues here. This is Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh there. He came to an event of ours in December and is really keen with this idea. And if you're not terribly familiar with the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, it's basically a process where young people go through a self-driven program where they do some service, they do physical exercise, they do an educational piece, they do basically an adventure piece, which involves resiliency and all sorts of things. But it's sort of a whole body and mind sort of process. And we're seeking to work with that kind of thing, but to infuse all these social emotional things we've talked about into young people. How do we build character early on? How do we build all these different things that can change the culture of an organization, change the culture of a school, change the culture of a community, all for the better. So that's kind of what we're working on these days. And we've just launched what we're calling now a global skills, core global skills council, where we're going to, with all of our partners, and we've maybe 10 or 12 universities globally, 10 or 12 NGOs, a whole range of different folks. And we're going to do this core skills council. We'll do everything from research to programming to curriculum development to help with policy, to do all sorts of stuff. So we have just kind of given it a soft launch. We started developing it the last year or so, but we're hoping to create a clearinghouse for all this kind of information and programs and everything else that people can have. We're working with the UN to develop, it's going to take a little while, but to develop a global empathy gauge that we can look at, different places in the world and see to what extent empathy is, growing or decreasing, what areas it's growing or decreasing. This will form an empathy observatory, which is going to be a lot of research and other things. We're putting together a global youth council to help drive these sort of things. Again, what do they see as the core things? And we're always looking for more and more partners. So if anybody's interested, we'd love to have you on board in any shape or capacity. This is a societal wide thing. It's not just linked to universities or NGOs or others. There's no shortage of work to go around. So we need people of all different backgrounds and ideas and everything else. So with that, I'll wrap up and we can just chat a bit. And I just kind of like to think about this just a little bit. There's all these young people out there. Let's listen to them a bit more. Let's listen to each other a bit more. And then, for all of us that are, maybe young at heart, but maybe are older, we've got tremendous power and everything else in our careers and our jobs. We can clear the lane. We can make room for young people to do what they want to do. We can take some of the punches for them as they're trying to make change happen. And I think we should look for opportunities to do that. We can find ways to do that. So, and you'll have this around later on, but here's all my contact information and stuff. I'd love to talk more with everyone. Any ideas, anything else would be great. So with that, I'll stop sharing and we can have a bit of a chat.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mark. That was fabulous. I'm really keen to hear from other people. Does anyone have any comments or questions for Mark? Maybe while we're waiting, Mark, I'm really interested in, obviously you throughout the presentation indicated that you're willing to share resources and everything with people that are involved in the presentation. But what would you recommend people do themselves? Like what can people do within their own organisations or within their own sort of sphere of influence? Have you got any suggestions for maybe starting small?
Yeah, I think one of the things we're seeing globally is that people aren't as engaged as much anymore. And I'm not saying that as a guilt trip or anything like that. We're all busier than we always were too. But the number of clubs and organizations and things we historically were part of have gone down. That could just be a change over time. There's maybe more things to do or other things. But I think finding ways to be engaged, whether it's volunteering here and there, or whether it's being part of a club or an organization, any kind of things like that. Because one of the things that's really important there is that by doing that, it opens up a lot of things. Any kind of venue for interaction is important. And through any of those kind of things, we're just engaging with more and more people. We're interacting with more and more people. And with that, we see it tends to open up opportunities to do other things. If you and I are part of a club and I come and meet you one Saturday, you may say to me, do you know that the older folks down the road are having some health issues? Can you help? So it opens up awareness and opportunities for us to be involved. And it could be little things or other things. Because one of the things we tend to see too is that our social networks are smaller than they used to be. We used to engage with a lot more people. Some people could point to technology or other things, who knows? But there's different things. If we can kind of build up those networks, the more we have, that's the more kind of contacts we have within a place. And it's more people that can tell us what's going on there that we might not know about. And it's more people that can actually invite us to help fix those things or to be involved in something. And it can be as little as, preparing a meal for someone up the street, or it can be, taking part in a community cleanup. It can be taking part in a protest. You pick your favorite thing, but it can be, it's that engagement that matters.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
I am really keen to hear from someone else. Does anyone have any questions? You can put them in the chat if you prefer not to turn on your mic and speak. Samuel are waving at me there. Oh, yep, there is a question in the chat. So Joe has asked.
Oh, sorry.
That's right.
I've got a question. I'm curious to know, how do we make or encourage empathy in social media? Because I just see that it seems to be getting a lot more grumpy out there. And so when we're putting stuff out for consultation and that sort of stuff, and everyone just sort of piles on government and assumes that government's out for a conspiracy theory, like the guy that was fixing my tap yesterday told me that the government had a conspiracy theory for the algal bloom here in South Australia and that it was a D-cell plant, even though and so I was like, how do you engage in an empathetic way or encourage empathy in those social media commentary to get people to engage?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. Yeah. I mentioned the global citizenship work I'm doing with UNESCO. I'm going to be working on site with them for pretty much the month of May, and it's revising their recommendations to teachers and schools about how to develop social, emotional, and citizenship stuff. The reason we're doing that is their original recommendations came out in 2013, and as we look at it, people were barely talking about social media then, or AI, or any of these things. So how do we know it's real? How do we know, all these sort of things? I don't exactly know. I know some of the stuff I think we can do. I think practicing empathy is key. I think social media just is wired around getting a reaction from people. And I think the more empathy we have, it allows us to kind of control our brains before they get out of control. I have a friend of mine who does a lot of empathy work, and he said to me, I was complaining one day that somebody cut me off on the way to work, and and I fumed about it for the entire commute into work and sat there and finally told him about it. And he said, that's all time that was taken out of you. You were frustrated by that. You were angered by all that. Why was your reaction to do that instead of saying, well, maybe he was running to the hospital for an emergency. Maybe he was, had to go pick up a sick child or something like this. And if you jump to that kind of level of trying to understand what the person conceivably, theoretically might have been doing, it breaks that process. And I think that's one of the things we see on social media. It's all about, you've just told me some conspiracy theory and I want to tell you how you're wrong and everything else. I think it's much more constructive, and especially with young people, if we get them in the habit of doing this, it's much more constructive to say, what do you think could have got somebody to the point where they would believe that, that could actually be true, or that was it, or, as people go on and on about politics and everything else, like, yeah, I don't agree with that person at all, but how could, what was their journey that got them to follow this person who was, maniac, So I think it's kind of a fundamental kind of shift a bit, like of a lot of the responsibilities on us. And, and I will applaud Australia for outlawing social media for young people too. So, I think that's, I don't know if it's the answer or not, but I think it's a good thing. But I think, it's kind of exhibiting empathy that way. I think it helps us not buy into the
perhaps
the
we need to
anger
build
and
it
the
into our comms plans to
Yeah.
have a line in about empathy and how we'll respond in an empathetic way or something.
Yeah, because I mean, we always have a choice in how we respond. We often don't think we do. And I think if we can get our brains thinking about things before we start picking the fight, before we start doing whatever, what brought somebody to be this way? What brought somebody to believe this way? What's a possible other scenario for why somebody cut me off? And then I think we act differently, and I think eventually that short circuits the social media madness. I hope. So.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Fabulous, Michelle. Thank you. Justine has her hand up, and then Jessica.
Hey, Justine.
Not working.
Oh, there you go. We can
now
hear
is
you.
it working?
There you go.
There we go. Okay. Youth is totally disengaged in the democratic process. I've done quite a bit of door knocking through some government campaigns recently, and just the level of just distrust in the whole voting system. And when I saw that, significant population is under 15, our age of voting is 18, and there doesn't seem to be much sense of that. What's your thought about lowering the age so that our youth can actually vote and have a say in their future?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely it should be. I think it should be lowered in everywhere. I mean, just one of the biggest take-home things I've had from the last 15, 20 years of just working with young people is how much they do know, how aware they are. We continuously hear that they don't know the real world and everything else. I think they're painfully aware of the real world. And I've actually, been incredibly humbled about how accurate they were in things. Not like they don't know everything, we don't know everything, but I think at 16 or so, they're perfectly qualified to make decisions about their future. And I think they're, and I think we should find ways to, have their voice woven into how we help plan for the future and everything else. They're incredibly astute, they're incredibly accurate. And I know we can all point to examples of things that are the negative of that, but the big take-home thing I've seen is just how incredibly prepared they are. And I think much like other things, much like civic engagement and community involvement and everything else, we see the same thing. People get involved in the democratic process earlier on. They vote lifelong. They go to protest marches. They go to knock on doors to do things. So when we wait till they become some magical number and say, voila, you're an adult, congratulations, that we don't see things be sustainable. So I think getting them involved earlier on, no brainer for me.
Amazing. Jessica.
I just hope all this works. I'm sorry, my internet's a bit slow today.
No, you're fine.
So one of the comments that you made that took me back, it was the don't trust anybody over 30. But as we grow older, because of the months of life, I guess we all become a little bit more cynical, a little bit less trusting and the like. How do we maintain that empathy? And how do we, and I was wondering whether we can sustain some level of that concept of humility in leadership that it seems to kind of just fall apart as we grow older. How do we continue, I guess, the momentum that we try to build with young people?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, and and I don't believe that we shouldn't trust anybody over 30. I'm just, I often tell my students a story that my earliest memories were of going to a protest march when I was probably 3 years old, 4 years old. Very, very early memory. And I just thought it was amazing. It was power to the people. It was, what I thought were older people who were 15 or 16 were, changing the world and everything else. And that was the origin story. And then a few years ago at Christmas, I asked my mother, do you remember what was that we, march we went to or whatever? And she just looked at me and sighed and said, I don't know. I said, well, how can you not know? It was so transformative to me. And she said, well, look, I was a single mother. We didn't have a television set. You were a hyperactive child. I'd take you to marches. You'd run around and scream and yell and then come home and have a nap. And that was my, so that was my introduction to Don't Trust Anybody Over 30. No, I think as we do, again, it's a choice. As we get older, I think we do become more cynical. We've taken all the lumps that life can throw at us. We've seen different things work and fail, and that's frustrating. I think keeping ourselves young at heart is key. And I find being around young people is just incredibly invigorating. I find that their energy and their enthusiasm rubs off. I find that I, start thinking the way I should be thinking, not thinking like, somebody much, much older who, whatever. So I think being around them, getting their input, treating them as equals, soaking up some of that energy and passion. But I think also, playing a role in supporting them is key. I think, they want to do an awful lot of things, and, we want to do a lot of things too. And maybe life beat us down a little bit, but, we can still keep taking those punches. We can still keep clearing the way for them. And I think that's an important thing. I think we choose to act old. And I think we just have to have that active ability to say, no, what I believed in when I was 16 is what I believe in now. And I'm still going to hold true to those principles and those ideas. And I'm going to help people that are trying to do the same thing. So I think that it's part of that. But I think that's kind of just a narrative we've got to keep reiterating in ourselves. And then I think, again, being exposed to these young people, they're making it happen. And before you know it, you're looking at them like you're looking through your 16-year-old eyes, and it's pretty cool. So,
fantastic. Mark, we've got a couple of comments or questions in the chat as well that I'm going to read out to you, and then Emma, I might come back to you in a second if that's
sure.
all right. So the first one, Sam says, thank you for this great chat. I'd like to help, but I feel I lack the skills and social whereabouts. And then Sam's also followed up with, how can we build community and advocacy? How do we build our own skills to do this area? Is there a course available for being able to do it, to be there for others in a way that can make an impact?
Yeah, great questions. Yes. Again, I think, even small efforts to be involved in our communities goes a long way. And it opens up new opportunities and other things. The other thing, and I can send you this, when I'm working with communities and we're doing a lot of community organizing or development work, there's a really neat tool that we often use called asset mapping or asset-based planning. And really what it is just a way to do an inventory. Most of us are pretty humble. We don't think we have anything to offer or anything unique. But I mean, there's a bunch of us here right now. If we went around here and just did a quick inventory, there's people who've worked in government. There's people who have, families that have connections to things. They can get us resources for cheap to do different things. There's people who have all kinds of life experience. There's people who are great at throwing parties and fundraisers. There's people, if you do this inventory of things, we realize all of a sudden we've got tremendous capacity. And at the individual level, we have tremendous amounts of things to offer. The other thing we do with that kind of stuff is, we open up by identifying our skills. We also identify things we might want to learn how to do. I don't know, I'm sure some of you do fundraising or have done fundraising or other things. I've seen people that are amazing at that. They do it and they come away energized, excited, everything else from doing it. I'm the type, I do it, I have to take a nap afterwards. I'm just completely, it takes everything out of me. But I'd love to learn how to do it right. And I can be an apprentice to those of you that know how to do it. So looking at those things, we can kind of figure out ways to organize around things, to use the skills we have, to create new skills, and that kind of stuff. So I'm happy to share some of the curriculum we have for that. And I think just get involved. Good things will come out of it. It doesn't have to be a big thing, it could be a little volunteering once a week. It could be, just joining a club or whatever else. But it's going to expand the number of contacts and connections we have. Those touch points within a community, and that just opens the door for a lot of things. Opens the door for awareness and for people to invite you to be part of things. So.
Fabulous, Mark. And I think there's a bit of interest in some of the resources. So what I might do is get you to send them to me, and then we can distribute them to people if you're comfortable with that.
Sure.
Because
Absolutely.
Joanna has also asked, Joanna says, I've got 2 teenage children. How can I best guide them towards some of the programs you spoke about? You spoke about a gap year program. Is it possible to get more information on that? Yep. So Joanna, we can get that and forward it on to you so you've got that information.
Yep, I'll get you all the stuff. I'll send you the any of these things I mentioned, but with the empathy stuff there for gap year, and send you the instruction manual, the materials, everything. You got it all, and it's designed for, you know, either peer-to-peer teaching or self-taught or other stuff. So it'd be great.
I'm just going to go one more question and from the chat, and then I want to go to Emma. I'm aware of time though. So Joe has asked, do you see a way to engage youth in agriculture so that our food future is more secure and less dependent on tech and machines?
Yes, yeah, I think there's a couple areas, especially in the context of ag. A few years ago, I was part of a project with UNESCO, and they were looking at basically, you know, how to keep young people in agriculture. And, you know, one of the things we see throughout the world is, you know, if I want to take over the family farm, I have to wait till my parents give it to me when they're about 90 and I'm about 80 or 70, you know. So, you know, it's hard to have ownership over the things. One of the things that we're seeing a lot of now is that young people have found a way to do the kind of best of both worlds. That they, you know, there's a big push to creating sort of kind of niche markets or entrepreneurial efforts within the context. So I do a lot of work in Ireland, and a lot of dairy farming there, for example. And families hold on to the farms forever as well. What we're seeing is young people creating side businesses out of it. So creating, you know, artisan cheeses and creating, you know, unique things like that. So depending on what kind of agricultural setting they're in or other things, you know, I think there's ways that young people can be encouraged to create new things. And also, I think there's ways that we can facilitate them having, you know, farm transition and other things that maybe, you know, maybe are based on a combination of new technology and new techniques, or much more importantly, you know, age-old proven techniques. And I think young people very often are very interested in kind of both sides of that. I think they're very appreciative of historical ways of doing things. And as the number one issue I hear with all of them anymore is very often climate change and climate justice. So I think looking at sustainable ways of doing agriculture that have proven effective in the past, they're the population that'll want to do it. So those kind of things.
Amazing. Thank you. Emma, I'm going to go to you for your question.
Morning, Mark. Nice to see
Hi,
you
Emma.
again.
Good to do.
How are you going?
Doing all right. Good to see you.
That's good. You too. Thank you for today. I suggest that a fair few people here on the screen may be in government or, you know, large organisations. Have you got some examples in the resources of where government have made a commitment to including young people's voices in strategy and policy? That would be a good, I suppose, benchmark for Australian and state government agencies here to replicate or start the journey. I know that some government departments are quite invested in hearing from young people, and others are on the journey, but how do we start to implement this as policy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've seen some places where it's been done better than others. You know, I think in a lot of places there's still the mindset that they don't know, young people don't know the real world, and, you know, that sort of thing. You know, at the local level and kind of regional levels, even with our youth researcher stuff, I've seen a lot of policymakers get very turned on by videos and say, oh, okay, this makes sense. I see what they're saying. And that's led to, you know, community government coalitions. It's led to insight into you know, policy and other things. I still think it's a long way to go, though. There's certain places where it's, you know, I do a lot of work in Ireland, and they've gotten pretty good with with youth coalitions and kind of those sort of things to get youth input. But still, very often we see them as there's a pocket of youth over here, and there's a pocket of other folks here, and God forbid the two of them should run into each other. But I will say at some of the NGO levels, UNESCO's been pretty good at it. They wanted to actively get a youth voice, and the UN as well with the UN Youth Commission. They have youth coalitions that they actually listen to, that young people drive the agenda and they actually listen to. But I think finding other ways too, like this research stuff, their ability to come to the table with just a little bit of data really puts people at ease in terms of policymakers, and makes policymakers realize that this isn't just a young person's opinion. This is actual, they've actually thought about this and they've actually studied this and other things. But I think mechanisms like that, I think, and then I think too, it's probably, again, for all of us that are involved in these settings, if we value what young people have to bring to the table, how do we start creating space for them within our own, our own teams, our own organizations, our own piece of government, whatever it is. There's ways to do it, but I think we just need to continuously be doing it. And I would say with that too, that there's a lot of youth engagement out there in different settings, but I personally find it often very kind of tokenistic, or they create a setting where it's almost setting them up to fail. I've seen an awful lot of high-powered board of trustees with billionaires on it and powerful people, and then they put a 19-year-old on it as the youth voice and expect the person not to be intimidated or dismissed or other things. So I think we've got to create structures for them where they can shine.
Amazing. Thank you, Mark. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm aware that it's time, and I do like to try and keep to time as best I can because I know you've all got very busy lives. Mark, you get to go and have dinner now, I assume, while the rest of us are still probably having breakfast. But thank you so much for such a stimulating and inspiring talk. I think a lot of us have learned some different things, and it's really sparked some thinking about how we can do things differently and think about youth in a different way. So thank you so much for your time, for joining us. And thank you to everyone else for taking the time out of your day or out of your week to learn something different and to prompt some different thinking. So really appreciate that. You can catch this talk on the YouTube channel shortly, and we'll look forward to seeing you at future events. So thank you so much for your time today. Enjoy the weekend.
Okay. Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.